What's up, everybody, and welcome to season 6, episode 10, take two of Dualistic Unity with Jackie and Amanda. Our previous version of this episode didn't have my video, so unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation. I mean, I can't even say unfortunately, really, and we'll get into that more in this conversation. It was just a beautiful reflection on how complex and uncertain and mystifying our experience of reality really is. So I'm excited to get into that.
Yes, this episode was very lighthearted, and it only feels lighthearted now because we discuss processing the unpleasant feelings that come with curveballs, and I'm really excited for all of you to join us and to share your thoughts on how you pivot when things don't necessarily go your way, but how your way isn't the only way. So I look forward to continuing this, and I hope you guys really enjoy it. We'll see you soon.
All right. Yeah. And upon the terribly unfortunate news that the last three episodes that we recorded for season 6 have no video, we are starting over with season 6, episode 10. And we could get all upset about it. We could cry and give up. Or we could just say, well, of course that shit was going to happen because why were we ever expecting nothing to go wrong? Every time I've had that expectation for nothing to go wrong without fail, it has been disturbed in some way. Something is always going to go down. Uncertainty is just a part of reality, and we might as well just accept that as fact. We might as well just accept it, and then when it does stir a little chaos in our lives or, you know, makes things not go our way, we don't have to make that any harder on ourselves. We can just say, all right, and pick up right where we left off and keep on chugging. And so that's what we're doing. We're starting it over and it's all good. I'm not going to let it get me down. How are you doing, Amanda?
I am feeling motivated, certainly. And this is you know, there are no mistakes, as the famous Bob Ross, the painter, has told us. Only happy accidents, and I think this is one of those. And in great timing. Happy New Year, happy 2024. Starting the year, quote unquote, is starting over, and so are we. And so we really hope that everyone else is just as excited for the newness of every moment, right? Not just of every year, because time is something that we made up, and it can feel so differently depending on your perspective. But regardless to official time frames and blocks, it's this moment is always new. And it always gives us an opportunity to paint a new picture on this infinite blank canvas of existence. So I'm really glad to be able to do that with you, Jackie. And I am a little bummed out about the video not recording, but it's uh it's okay because it gives us a moment to take a look to see if we were, attaching to any expectations or holding on to some expectation of how things would unfold. And life is full of surprises and curveballs, if nothing else.
Oh, definitely. Yep. It's the cookie's just gonna crumble the way it crumbles. And you have really no choice but to just deal with it, deal with life as it comes. I think a lot of the pain that I experience in my life has come from trying to sort of mentally control the future, or at least, I had this expectation of what I wanted to happen. And I feel this pops up in like every single situation. It's always there of just like anticipating what's coming next, but also kind of attaching to outcomes that I want to happen. And then, getting bent out of shape when it doesn't happen. But the thing is, I was the one that caused that suffering for myself when it wasn't necessary. And that's not to say I did something wrong in doing that. I think that's just something that is a part of this human experience of having this tool of the mind that can plan and, you know, execute complex tasks and, is very aware. And that's what has made us such an advanced species, right? Is that we have this crazy powerful tool of our mind, right? But I think the mind has been compared to a chainsaw in previous episodes, right? And it's true. It's a very useful and effective tool, a chainsaw. But if you don't know how to use a chainsaw, if you turn the chainsaw on yourself, which we do with our mind constantly, you can cause a lot of damage. Like it's very powerful. And so, as corny as it is, like with great power comes great responsibility. And that's something that I feel like is becoming more and more nuanced every single day of just how to wield this responsibility of my mind, of, whatever this consciousness is, and like take responsibility for it as being me and knowing that my experience only comes down to what I am investing in, what I'm attaching to, what I'm giving attention to. And so, like, I really can't be the victim of my life because I am my life, right? It's not just all this shit happening to Jackie the character and I'm just Jackie. It's like I am the whole situation happening, right? I'm just a little piece. I'm both at the same time. And so I'm playing my role as Jackie, yes, but I don't have to take it seriously. I don't have to think that everything that Jackie wants is what should happen. Like, it would be really boring to watch a movie where, like, what the protagonist wanted to happen was exactly what happened, right? That would be really boring. And the protagonist probably wouldn't grow very much as a result, right? Adversity and challenge and disappointment is a necessary part of this reality. And as annoying as it is when shit like that happens, when your videos don't record and like right before we hopped on this episode, I was like rushing to get ready and I knocked my bottle of oil because I started oil pulling and I knocked my bottle of oil off the countertop and it busted open and oil was everywhere. That happened right before this. And like I could be mad, but the only one that would be holding on to that weight is me. And the only person's experience that it's negatively impacting is my own. So like I could get mad or I could just laugh and clean it up, which is what I did. And I find that coping with uncertainty is so much easier when you're just expecting it, right? And you're not expecting it to kick you in the ass. Like, of course it would.
Oh my goodness. I resonate so hard with knocking over the jar or the container of oil and choosing to laugh as you're picking up that mess because uh, the likelihood of it falling is because we were rushing, right? And we're rushing because we think that we have to be somewhere and we're not there soon enough. And you're rushing, and so you're not paying attention to that cup of oil because had you been walking to a little bit slower, you would have seen it, or the chances are very high that you would have seen it and never would have knocked it over. But because we're rushing, we can't take everything in our direct environments. And so I love being corny too, by the way. And I love that you brought with great with great power comes great responsibility. But I also think the opposite is, it might be also worth considering that, with great responsibility comes great power. Because when you own the responsibility of every single one of your moments, those moments feel more powerful. And so it's funny that in the movies, the power is gets the most time on stage. Power, powerful, all powerful. No one can defeat me. And it's like such a focus on power. But I think it's really responsibility that might be maybe not the only, but maybe a solid source of power might be our responsibilities. Um, I don't know. What do you think?
No, I definitely that resonated a lot where and I'm seeing it as like the present is the only place you really have influence, so you have to take responsibility for right now and what you're doing right now. And the more that you do that, the more you see that shit actually starts to move because you're actually interacting with reality than like sitting back in your mind and like prospecting and trying to figure out the right move. And because that's sometimes how I can end up. Like I can end up in, just this state of uh like trying to figure things out rather than actually just doing them. Just sitting back trying to control things. But that makes me feel a lot less powerful because it's like I'm thinking all these things, but thinking about it doesn't actually put anything in motion. Thinking kind of just makes you feel like you're doing something without actually doing anything. And the time where I feel the most powerful and most like intimately connected to this reality and my existence and where I feel like I have influence is when I'm doing things outwardly. Like when I'm talking on the podcast or when I'm like making something. And it's because I'm really just invested and fully involved with that moment. And that's like we do have power. Like we can manipulate our environment as ourselves. Like we're like alchemists. It's really, really cool to witness your own power. It's always so much more than we give ourselves credit for. But I think when we're not giving ourselves that credit, we tend to sit back and yeah. So it's like both at the same time. Like you have to take responsibility in order to have power, but also like you're still having influence. Like you still have power even if you're not being responsible. So it's like whether your experience is dependent on how you're wielding that power, right? And you can be responsible with it, or you can do what the vast majority of people right are doing right now and having like fucking chainsaw wars. And that's why the world is like you know, some might argue it's going downhill fast. It's, we're in this cycle of capitalism and consumerism and egotism and nationalism and separation, basically. And we collectively are going through this illusion of separation and it's pushed us to this point where like I don't know, like we're pointing the finger at everybody else, not taking responsibility for ourselves and what we can do, and it's just making the problem worse. Um, so yeah, I guess that's what I think. I don't really remember where I started this, but I guess that's the point. That we're just these episodes are just us like walking through the the field, the infinite vast field of our consciousness and just seeing where it goes. Like I'm not trying to say anything intelligent or I'm not trying to give you an insight. We're kind of just here to talk through it. And it's cool to see how at least my perspective towards these conversations have changed because I think at first I would go into the episodes sort of like with things in mind to talk about, like things that I thought were insightful or like a little nugget that I could share with everybody that I felt like, okay, like even if I don't love everything that I said, at least I had these little key things that I feel like are very likely to resonate. And the more that I've recorded these episodes and like listened to them back, the more that I realize that I never actually know the impact that I'm having. And it's funny because even though I thought like by trying to control the things that I was saying and like trying to make them valuable, like from my perspective, how am I trying to put this? Like trying to control that, first of all, it's not never guaranteed, right? And second of all, it was limiting my experience and my enjoyment of it because I was I thought I was trying to present myself in a way that was best for everybody else, but I think I was just more so hyper fixated on how I wanted to perceive myself. Or and then now more so it's like, well, I can't know how other people are perceiving me. And also it's getting harder and harder for me to have a solid perception of myself. Like even when I watch back videos of myself at two different times in a day, I'm like, I have a completely different perspective of that person and what she's saying. I don't know if that's making sense. I talk about myself in very meta ways sometimes, and I'm like, hopefully this is following, but yeah, it's like I view myself differently at different times and in different situations and when I'm in different moods. So like it's just completely not worth thinking about what I'm like or how I'm being perceived. And so now my perspective is more so like this conversation is about the conversation. And like it's always been that. Yes, but like I think my appreciation for that has deepened since doing it like on this platform, right? Because now there's like, I guess, stakes, or it's like the temptation to measure myself is there. And it's just, I'm realizing that I can't measure myself. Like, I just can't. As much as I wish I could, as much as I wish I could know how I'm doing, I can't. Also, that's not what this is fucking about. And that's a habit I'm trying to break of like trying to know or control how I'm being. Like, that's not what it's about. Why am I viewing myself from the outside? Like, this is the only thing that I know is my experience. And the fact that I prioritize other people's experiences that I could never know with certainty even exist, like, the fact that I do that is insane to me, frankly. And yet I still do it. And so, yeah, it's just, I'm glad now that this is more so about the act of doing it rather than the product of the podcast, right? Like that's not what this is about. This is an exercise in presence and acceptance and flow.
Oh yeah. And uh I'm definitely following, and so many other people are, when you speak, Jackie, it resonates and it makes sense. And even when it quote unquote doesn't make sense, that's not because you didn't say it in the best way. That's not because you didn't use the best words. That could just be because someone is not resonating with where you currently are because they're somewhere else, whether that is more relaxed or more tense. And on both ends of the spectrum, people could just not resonate with where you are on that scale, on that ever moving scale of tension and relaxation. um I love that are reminding all of us that you can change your environments. And another reminder is that usually you change yourself before the environment changes. So like, for example, you have a one bedroom apartment and you just move in and you barely have any furniture, but you also happen to have a very large interest in art and in painting. Now, before your environment changes to reflect that, usually you're doing research about painting techniques, you're buying books, your apartment is changing. You're learning about painting, and so you're learning about different tools. As you learn which tools and what things you want to use, your environment starts to be collected with certain canvases made of certain materials, certain paints, certain mediums, certain tools of the trade. But usually you've changed first. Now your environment reflects that. So as much as we change our environment, we change ourselves first. And we certainly don't need to remember like what we did before. And we can always fully embrace what's here, and I can work with what's here, and if I'm making a focus on remembering what I was doing yesterday, what I was doing might not have the same, it might not reflect the same environment as where I am right now, but it's this conversation is for this conversation. And having a few episodes that we recorded and now are not releasing certainly drives that home. Because it's easy to talk a good game. It's so easy to be like, yeah, this conversation is just for us, and more, not that it's just for us, but that when we record it not expecting anyone to listen. So it might just be us that listened to it because we heard it as we recorded it, and then we heard it as we edited it, and as we listened to it again later. But our ears could be the only ears that listen to any episode. And that was easy to say when we thought that the likelihood was low. Most likely, many ears would hear these chats. So the chats wouldn't just be for us, they would be for us and everyone else who listened to it. But now that it's legit, just us that listen to those few episodes, now it's like, oh, okay, so how's the application going, guys? And I think it's going great. I do think it's going great. It doesn't feel great at all times of application / execution, but I think it is going great. So I am glad that that it happened, because it just gives us another opportunity to see, where we're holding on to. And I also felt a little challenged, throughout today. I work another job, and today at work was a bit unpleasant. And I think it was unpleasant because I had the expectation on some level that it shouldn't be. And when it became unpleasant, I was like, oh, this is so annoying. I was like, yeah, but why is it so annoying? And it's like, maybe it's so annoying because, I don't want to be doing this job, but I still am. And it's like, so am I rushing to not working this job anymore? Because right now we're working this job. So like, are we annoyed that we're not living that future that we want, that we're working towards, to quit this job and work for DU full time, but we're not there yet. So, I was kind of like checking myself today, because I absolutely felt annoyed by the corporate politics, and it annoyed me that I have to play those games. But it's like, yeah, but this is where we're at. And if you really don't want to play, you can quit. But we're not in the position that I'd like to be to quit. So it's like, we're upset that we can't quit. We're upset that we have to work this job. We're annoyed that we have to play these games. And it's like, yeah, but we're only annoyed because we think it shouldn't be that way. And it is that way. And so it was like, we had some bubble bursting. we had some, and so add that on top of, we just don't have 3 episodes of video. We don't have the video for 3 episodes. And I'm like, this is great. But it's like, again, it's just things don't always have to feel pleasant. They don't always have to go my way. But when I take responsibility for the fact that I'm only suffering, I'm only feeling annoyed because I have an expectation that I created that I can't meet. And so I can just put that expectation down instead of continuing to provide the fuel for my annoyance machine inside my head.
And that's the only difference, right? I just think up until you realize that you can put that down, you don't, because you don't think you can, right? You're like, well, everybody else is like forming expectations and like settling on certainties and trying to get to certain outcomes and blaming other people when shit doesn't go their way. And so like there's no example shown to us of people who are like, yeah, well, it's okay to be uncertain. Like it's you don't have to try and create this like safety net of false certainty to like catch you in the future, because otherwise you're just gonna fly off into space and like your life is gonna fall apart, right? Like you don't have to over project yourself and your control into every single aspect of your life. You just can be there for it, right? But I resonated so much with what you were sharing about work because that's I still deal with that constantly. And that's, just goes to show that I haven't arrived anywhere. Like there's no it's not like I'm feeling peaceful and content all the time because I understand that I can't control anything and that like what I think is going on is not what's going on. Like my brain still constantly habitually does that. And like I fall victim to the illusion of false certainty and control. And, you know, I experience things like annoyance and frustration and anger and sadness when things happen that I'm not expecting them to. And that's fine. Like, I don't know. Sometimes when I'm caught up in, those feeling states of negativity when something happens that I wasn't expecting or something that I wanted to didn't happen. It's like when I'm in those states sometimes and I'm feeling like shit, sometimes I try to logic my way out of feeling it. Sometimes I'm like, oh, well, of course you don't have control. Like, of course that would happen. And, the outcome isn't going to be as bad as you're thinking it is. And, like you don't know how this is going to turn out. Like, sometimes I catch myself trying to avoid feeling the emotion by, using logic. And that's something I'm becoming aware of too, because I know that can be sort of an escape mechanism. That's another sense of false certainty and control, right? And so recently I've just been giving myself space to feel that, just with the recognition that like there is no certainty. And that doesn't mean I can't feel upset. I think for most of my life, I've viewed my negative emotions as something to be fixed, something to be solved, and that I think that kind of bled into, these realizations and like, waking up and feeling a lot more free. I've used that kind of as a method of control to feel good all the time. I've noticed. I've used it as a way to like suppress the feelings that are just coming up. And so recently I've been feeling a lot, like a lot. And there is the temptation to like, well, tell myself all these reasons why I should be feeling fine and that it's really not as bad as I think and, this and that. But I don't know. Recently I'm just like, that's okay too. And I can feel like this and I can still do all the things I want to do. And I have been. I'm still like, I know that feeling bad doesn't mean anything about me, but it's okay to feel this way sometimes too. Like, just because you're free doesn't mean you always have to feel free and good. And that's liberating in its own way.
Right? Because then we don't have this pressure to be constantly and without a break, always happy, always positive. Like this is, we don't want to live through the lens of toxic positivity. Like it does take a lot of the weight off because you don't have to be any one way. Just like for the people that are on maybe on the other end of the spectrum where like they feel like they have to be outwardly tough, they think that they have to be outwardly aggressive and that's how they navigate the world. And it's like when they realize, I don't have to speak with knuckle sandwiches only, hellos work as well, like it takes the pressure off of them, the tough guy, the tough girl, the tough person, or the person who feels the pressure to be the smartest person in the room, the person who feels the pressure to be the quietest in the room or the loudest or the funniest, or like when you don't pigeonhole yourself into being just one thing, it takes a lot of the weight. It takes the weight of expectation off of your own shoulders because only we bring the weight, and the weight could be many things, and is so many things contribute to the weight that we feel, and it's our doubts feel heavy, our judgments feel heavy, our expectations feel heavy, our assumptions feel heavy, our fears feel heavy, like all of those things feel heavy, and they all just pack on the mental weight. And so it's a wonderful when you can remind yourself, and wonderful when you take someone else as a reminder to you, and that can be in both ways. It's not just somebody who's walking around like chucking the weight off as it's starting to build on them. It's also somebody who never has weight, that's always relaxed, because a reminder can be the person who is losing their shit, and that is just as good as a reminder as somebody who looks like they have their shit together. And both can remind you of just potential expressed, and how you can be both and are both and neither at the same time. And it's just a matter of where's our focus, what are we prioritizing, and certainly I have been feeling separate. It's so easy to feel like, your boss comes to you and they're talking to you and you do not feel like the universe, usually, usually. I say usually, I don't mean all the time. Sometimes they're talking to you and you're like, yeah, that's right, Amanda, you tell me what to do. You tell me how great that report was, or you're telling me that I need to send you an email with a certain list or something, like whatever it is. Sometimes it feels like you're listening to yourself, and sometimes it does not. And when it does not is usually when you start to feel more annoyed and more frustrated or more anxious or more fearful, is usually when you feel more separate. And I just don't know that for sure. So anytime I feel myself feeling overwhelmed, I'm like, yeah, but I'm feeling overwhelmed because I have an expectation that I'm doing something wrong, and I don't know that for sure. I just don't know that for sure. And so it takes away a little of the momentum of all of those, anxieties and fears and doubts and annoyances that I feel. It kind of takes away a little bit of the momentum, so it doesn't feel like it's crashing into me. It's like, oh, yeah, yeah, I don't know. Well, I feel a bit silly now, like, so I go from feeling anxious and annoyed with everyone else to feeling silly that I got caught up. And it's like, yeah, but getting caught up is like a part of the experience. So then we go from feeling silly to laughing because it's just so absurd. All of this is so absurd.
It's either you can laugh or you can cry. It's absurd. Like, and that can, and sometimes I do cry. Sometimes I do cry. I laugh a lot more than I used to. But yeah, it's because at the root of this existence is just this fundamental mystery that, I mean, I can't say we're never gonna get it. Maybe the experience of being is all that there is to get, but it just feel like life is just confusing as fuck and uncertain, and that's scary. And that's just true. Like we're just from the perspective of this being, this I have the experience of separation, and that in itself creates vulnerability. And that's where the fear and the tension and the negativity and the anxiety come from, right? But then it literally is just that switch from like seeing yourself as a thing in the world versus seeing yourself as the world and the thing. And then humor is unlocked. And that's really all you can do. It's not like the fool who can laugh at themselves and is willing, and just has this like jovial relationship with reality, is knows something more, or like actually knows what's going on, as opposed to like the person who's all serious and thinks they know what's going on but really doesn't. But I think it's just the humility in recognizing that you don't know that is like a superpower in some sense. Like it gives you access to more potential because you're realizing, oh, like I don't have to take any of these trails. I can just walk wherever I want to go in the woods of potential, right? Like there's these carved out tracks of ways that we think are options to move, right? And just understanding that we can never know any sort of right way. There's so much more that comes on the table. And I think that definitely enhances your experience of reality. At least it has for me, like, and it's more involved with reality as it is, rather than trying to make reality into what you want it to be, right? Because that's like going against the current, and it slows you down when it if you're present in your day-to-day life and you have an open mind. Shit can happen, and shit can happen quickly because you're actually interacting with reality and like working together, flowing with the current of your life rather than trying to steer your ship against the current and inflict your will on reality rather than having it be a dance, have it be a collaboration. Because as much as you don't have control, like you also aren't separate, so you are part of the influence. You are part of the unfolding. And um so it's both. Like you can't just surrender completely and let your life, I mean, maybe you can. If you're looking from the perspective of epiphenomenalism, and you don't, and you recognize that you might not be in control of any of your thoughts or actions, maybe we always are just kind of floating along the river. But from an experiential perspective, like you have to participate and interact with reality. But like the more sensitive you become, like you can have more of like a reciprocal relationship where like things will happen to you and you're not like thrown off, you're not like upset, and you can take advantage of these opportunities, and then things will start to fall into place. And that's what I've witnessed in my life more so, like since having these types of conversations, is like I'm doing all these things because they make sense to me in the moment, and then in a way that I don't expect, things start to overlap, and all of a sudden things are happening, and like I'm somewhere completely different, and it feels like I was like, how did I get here so fast, right? But it's just because I'm interacting more with my reality. And that's really it. Like your potential, you have so much potential that you can tap into, but you have to be able to sit in a space of uncertainty in order to tap into that. Otherwise, you're stuck in this cycle of trying to control your reality and then have shit not go your way because of course it wouldn't go your way, and then being mad about it, and then trying to control it even harder, and like the tension just building and building until eventually you get tired of your own shit and recognize that it's not really worth all the stress. That's kind of the point I got to in my life, where that was my breaking point, and it's different for everybody. um but yeah, it's like really a useless game that we're trying to play in terms of thought and control and all of that. But it's so fucking pervasive. It's wild. And we don't even see that. We can't see it until we do.
And even then, we only see through the perception that we have at that moment. So we're seeing like, sometimes we're seeing the sliver, and sometimes we're seeing our perception of the sliver, and sometimes it's the perception of that damn sliver, So it's like, I don't even know really what I'm looking at when I'm looking at the moment that I'm in. I'm like, is this even physical? If my hand went through this laptop right now, I wouldn't be surprised. Like the science, the branch of science just gives us so much to chew on when they give me things like nothing's actually touching. Like all the atoms, when you zoom in close enough, they're not actually touching. So I'm like, so I've never touched anything. Like I've never, every chair that I've sat on, and yet everything is not disconnected. So I don't stop at my skin. So I'm like, okay, so on one breath, you're telling me that nothing touches anything, and yet everything is everything. So when is it not touching, right? And so I'm like, the things that get thrown at us are so contradictory because my mind, our mind, a mind, I can't even put it into words. Something's thinking, and it's thinking in circles, and that's what it feels like. Um, and then we have practices like mindfulness and presence and attention and awareness, and it's like, so I only have the experience of perceiving myself as being distracted and being separate, but it's not actually separate because we're not just what we feel like, which is one individual. But when I think about personal responsibility, I think about how a lot of what it feels like I experience, I create. And it feels just as true for everyone else when I'm looking at them. And as personally as it can feel, it's not actually personal when someone else um, is feeling frustrated and isn't paying attention to how that frustration is overflowing into everything else, because we are all connected. You know, it's we've had the phrase like anger is contagious or happiness is contagious, and it's how one person can change the energy or the mood or the mindset of an entire room, or how a room can change the mindset of one technical person in that room. And it's just it's because that's just another way for us to see that we are all connected, even when we feel like we're not, even when you feel like things are only happening to you. There's no way that it could just be the you that you think as like one small puzzle piece. It's 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 definitely confusing, but I think it feels confusing because I want to solve it, or I want to define it because I want to feel better about it, because I feel uncertain and I want to do something with that uncertainty. So a lot of times when I feel myself being annoyed, I am just upset that someone's getting in the way of me feeling better, and I'm only trying to feel better because I think that there's someone else.
Well said. Yeah, I think our sense perceptions are so enveloping. It's they're so all consuming, right? Like we don't know anything besides our senses. And so we don't really have like it just is natural for us to accept that that's reality. And the way that we're perceiving things, we feel it. And so it's real to us. And so we're like, yeah, this is what's actually happening. Like I feel like I'm touching my finger right now, but they're not actually touching. And yet they are. Yeah. It's like the concept of me versus not me is just that only exists in my head. The conceptual separation isn't real. It doesn't exist anywhere except for, well, I guess I can't say it doesn't exist anywhere because exists here within my experience, which is just as much reality as this outward reality. But things like sense withdrawal for me like really help drive that point home of like, yeah, this isn't separate. Like having a conversation with somebody with my eyes closed where I'm like, well, I'm hearing their voice and I'm hearing my voice in a similar way. I'm sort of experiencing the things I'm saying as I'm experiencing them. So I can't really take 100% credit for it in the same way how it feels to listen to somebody else speak, where you're just sort of passively hearing them. And without the visual of seeing them as being separate from you, within the realm of your experience, they're they're part of you. They're part of whatever that conscious experience is that is just wherever you are at any given point. So that's something I love to do as a reminder of, yeah, we're not separate, but it's really damn convincing. The illusion is so fucking convincing. So I don't I don't get mad at myself for falling victim to it, right? And like getting caught up. That's part of it too, right? Like if we didn't get caught up, then we couldn't have clarity. So that's just another aspect of this dualistic experience. And it's so cool that we get to experience the feeling of being just one thing. And yet we can also experience the feeling of being everything. That feeling of being everything is so like when you feel it, it feels obvious, but then it's so funny how we can like trick ourselves. We're like playing hide and seek with ourselves constantly, or like we're playing pretend, and it's a really fucking convincing game. But yeah, there's both tragedy and comedy when you realize it's been a game this whole time, right? The universe just playing with itself as itself.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I closed my eyes while you were just talking, Jackie, and I was like, that sounds like it sounded like your voice was in my head. And how can I say it wasn't? How can I be sure that it wasn't, and in the same way, like when I'm thinking of my thoughts, how do I know that they're happening in my head? Right? I always point to my skull, like, how do I know for sure that that's happening in the skull? How, what if it's not? Or what if it's not only, right? It's so crazy how fast my brain goes to like black and white templates. Oh, so quick. It's lightning speed, the turnaround time, man. It's crazy. But that is a part of the experience too. And I definitely beat myself up when I get caught up because I'm like, how long have we been thinking about this, Amanda? Like, when are we gonna get it together? And it's like, oh, but who are you like who are you being frustrated with about existing? I'm not existing efficiently. Like, what? It's just insanity. It's absolute insanity. But I have felt more insane when I was living according to the socially approved template. When I was going to college full time, working full time, spending my free time studying, eating poorly, eating fast food, pretending or not pretending, but not making my health a priority. So not really exercising, not meditating, or not making an intentional effort to be mindful of breathing and how that impacts your health and your energy levels. And so I was doing all the things that were approved in like modern America, like work yourself to the bone because you're young and you're able-bodied. You can't complain because you gotta pick yourself up by your bootstraps, and you've got to work countless hours. And I felt more insane then. So feeling insane because I'm processing the awareness of getting caught up. So it's not even that we're beating ourselves up just for getting caught up. It's we're beating ourselves up for the extra attention that we've given to the process of getting caught up. And I'm beating myself up because we didn't do that faster. We didn't do that because we're still doing that, but because we've become aware that we've gotten caught, that we can get caught up. That means that I can't get caught up anymore because I'm aware that I could do it. Now means I shouldn't do it because now I know better. And that crazy little lesson that I remember getting as a little girl, you shouldn't have done that. You should have known better. And so I had that expectation as an adult, and I have the expectation that because I know better about how I can create suffering for myself, I shouldn't be doing that anymore because I know that I could. And so it's crazy how unreasonable we are. And yet, it's easier for me to lift up someone else because I think that they are someone else, and it's easier for me to remind them that they're limitless and they've got all this potential and they can do it. And yet it feels so much harder to be able to do that for myself because I think that we're different and I think that we're separate. But I can I can always have an opportunity, or I always do have the opportunity to be a friend to what feels like myself. You know, it just feels like for some reason like it's easier to be everyone else's friend but yourself, but you were your first friend. So how funny, just how funny that is that I forgot that I was my first friend. And now the I has gotten bigger and the friendship feels larger. And so I'm glad that we get to have these chats, Jackie, because even if something were to go wrong again, like I am changing because of them, and because I'm changing, the environment is changing, and the environment is all of us and everything. It feels incredible.
It really does. Yeah, like being able to reach out and talk about this stuff, like the root of our being, and hearing people resonate and say similar things that I've felt. And like, of course, we haven't felt them in the same way because we are different in every single way, right? Like, it's like we're so different, and yet fundamentally, at the root of it, we're the same. And we experience ourselves and our separation in what I assume to be a similar way based on, like, the things we talk about. And Yeah. That it's cool to be able to know that you're not alone, and it doesn't fix anything necessarily, in the same way that like being a friend to yourself and recognizing and having like empathy and compassion for yourself doesn't make you feel good all the time. Like, having a community and having these conversations isn't a fix. It's not gonna take your life and turn it into the magical utopia dream world that you like have in your head, because that's just not the way that reality works. And our perception, even of what's happening now, is so limited, so incredibly limited. Like, I was talking with Andrew a little bit earlier, and we were saying how I measure my quote unquote progress, or like I determine how I'm doing in my experience based on only a few different factors that I tie to my personal identity, right? So certain things that I notice or I tie value to, like, being well spoken, like I don't know, because I enjoyed this conversation, or like I don't know, just things that I get down on myself for, and the way that I measure my progress is not the way that anybody else is measuring my progress or perceiving me at all. And there's actually so much more going on, and I'm growing. I can be growing so much in so many other places, but I can't recognize that growth because it's not related to how I already view myself, or it's not in line with how I already view myself. And that is just such a beautiful reminder, because I can really get down in the dumps or like stuck in a perception of what I'm going through, and just recognizing that that's not even beginning to scratch the surface of what's actually going on. Like, that perception that I settle on, and I'm like, yeah, I'm doing bad. I'm like, or I'm, like, it's crazy that I feel like I can settle on that when I really sit back and look at the grand scheme of things, and how every single person that hears me speak, meets me, has a completely different perception of myself. And what they say, like one word that they may use to describe me, like maybe something that I never would have said or identified with. So it's just, you can never fucking know. You can never know how you're doing. You can never know where you're at in your journey. Like, I'll tell myself like, oh, I'm in a rut, or I'm in an angsty period. But like, do I actually know the full scope of what I'm processing, of what I'm going through? Do I know where that's going? No. So, really, in every moment, it's completely uncertain. Even what I'm feeling, I don't know why I'm feeling it. What I'm thinking, I don't know why I'm thinking it. I don't know if I should be thinking it or not. I don't know what the outcome will be of any of it. And so, there's no real point in trying to change it or create a narrative. And yet, my brain, I don't even know if it's my fucking brain, my like consciousness, my experience, right, will try and come up with a narrative to just make sense of what's happening. And it's going to keep doing that. But it's just a good reminder to be able to step back for a second when you're in the midst of that shit storm and be like, okay, but I don't know. And it's like a little place of refuge, like in the present. You can be like, okay, well, this next breath, everything is fine, right? I'm here. And all of that stuff that I think is happening isn't. Or it may be, but I would never know. So, like, what am I going to do? Freak out? Like, the freaking out never helps, because after you freak out and you're sitting there, like, wiping your tears away, you're like, okay, well, I'm still here. I'm still here, and it's still just as uncertain and uncomfortable. And I just got to sit here, and that can feel really dark, and it can feel blissful as fuck, and every shade in between. And we're just sitting there in this chamber of experience forever. And we can't say we're experiencing different ones either. Like our experience is inherently individual and separate in the sense that I can't have the experience of being you, and yet we also can't say that it's separate. It's like the same mind having multiple different dreams, right? All at the same time. And it's beautiful to behold, really. Like these conversations are really just like a celebration of, not even a celebration, but just giving this reality and all of its nuance and detail like the attention that it deserves, because it is so fucking compelling and awe-striking, awe-inspiring when you really take the time to look at it. I'm like, why is nobody talking about this?
And yet we are, and when we are, everyone is, right? Because there's no separation. So it feels impactful, and yet somehow it feels like I could do more, but it's only I think, and thinking is not doing. And I could think any thought that I perceive as negative or positive, but when I'm thinking, I'm not doing. And when I try to do both, I usually find myself knocking over jars of oil. And I had this which reminded me, I wanted to, when you first brought it up, I used to have this sand hourglass timer, and I had flipped it one time when we were cleaning, and I'm sweeping around my work desk, and I was in a rush when I was sweeping because I was almost done cleaning, and I was like, oh, I just flipped this, so we've got another 30 minutes. Let's see if we could finish up this last section of the apartment in the next 30 minutes. And I'm rushing, and I knocked over the glass hourglass, and it crashes on the floor, and glass and sand go everywhere. And I was like, so I guess we don't want to measure cleaning time anymore. That's exactly what I told myself. Message received, Amanda. No more measuring our cleaning time. We clean when we feel like it, and we stop when we feel like it. No more 30-minute cleaning blocks, I see. Got it. Got it. Sweeping up the glass, sweeping up the sand, and I definitely did not replace the hourglass. I thought about it. I was like, maybe not. That wasn't the greatest experience cleaning up all that sand that got everywhere. I think I want to wait before the next time I clean up a pile of sand and glass. But
That's a beautiful like image though, like a metaphor of like trying to control time and like trying to be so strict with it that eventually it's just gonna fall apart and hit the floor and shatter into a million pieces. And you can be reminded of how time is, we're never going to be able to grasp hold of it. It's not really something that's real, and yet we try to commodify it. And yeah, and those experiences in life where you're rushing, 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 and then something happens because you're rushing, and then you're forced to, take more time than you would have liked. It's just a reminder that like you can't control this. No, you can't. And it's going to remind you at every turn that that's futile. It's so
yeah.
it's futile to try and control, even try to fucking conceptualize it. Like there's this song called Futile Devices. It's talking about words, like how words are futile devices. And I always think about that because it is so true. Like it's just never gonna fully capture anything. Like you can never fully describe what a person is like. You can't describe the feeling of hearing their laugh. You can't describe the experience of watching a sunset. You can't describe the way the moon looks in the night sky. Like you can't describe the essence of something. And we as humans, our experience is essence. Like our experience is so, like it literally is,
Limitless.
you can't put it to words, it's essence. It's like sense perceptions, it's feelings, emotions, like things that we experience, but we can't put into words. And what our whole experience is, and yet we try so desperately to figure out what we're experiencing so that we can like communicate with that with other people, or like we can feel like we have something to hold on to.
Yeah.
And yet there really is nothing. We're in just like this endless pit of experience. Like, and as much as like we wish we could pull somebody into our pit and they could experience things as us, like they can't, but the closest we can do is sit next to each other and experience each other as each other, right? And like experience the world around us together. And it doesn't really need to be said, but like when you're with somebody and you can relax and let go of yourselves a little bit, you can feel that connection. You can feel the way they resonate with you. Like I feel that with you. Like I know our conversations are never going to get to the root of like the common feeling that we have, but like I feel it when we have our conversations, right? Like of just like you get it. I know you get it.
I resonate with the guesses. I getting it is such a funny thing to say, because I do feel like I get it, and yet that goes right out the window sometimes. All that getting it just gone.
It's unclear what get means and it's unclear what it means.
Yes, those are both debatable concepts, and
That's what I'm saying. Words can't touch it.
no, but
Concepts
words
can't
are
touch
still
it.
so much fun. I have such an admiration for words, because although words could never encompass the whole experience of existence, it can beautifully describe being a piece of the picture. And so I do love that about words, and they evoke the feeling in which the words were created from. And words can be so poetic, but again, it's not that the words are the most important part of a sentence. It's the feeling with which the words are spoken from. You have two people, and so you were talking about like someone's laugh or someone listening to someone speak. That can be both pleasurable and annoying from in the same pair of people, but as time goes on, maybe they deepen a friendship, and the laughter becomes more and more enjoyable. And it feels like to some degree that everything is a first. Every moment is a first, because although I have chatted with you, Jackie, countless times, this is the first time that we're chatting from this mindset today. This is the first time that I happen to be in a new location, and you are home, and I had a challenging day at work, and I didn't really like the office politics, but other days I enjoy the office politics, and other days I'm in a new place and I feel at home. Other days I'm in a new place and I feel out of sorts. So it's incredible that maybe to some degree, like every single moment is the first time you're having the sip of coffee, because it feels like we're always different. Like I feel like we're constantly changing. And so even though you feel like an individual, a different individual, a new creation of individualism is showing up in the moment, is fun. All that potential is funneling through you. And it feels like every moment is a first, but my mind will quickly tell me that, like, oh, I've been here before. Oh, I know what this is. Oh, I know what this looks like. But it's like, yeah, although you may have been through a similar looking picture, this technically is the first time you're in this picture of this moment. So it's not that life is all of a sudden more magical because of us and our podcast or the conversations we have. And so so for the people that are listening to this afterwards, we are the magic. And responsibility feels like a way to for a method of individual empowerment, because when I feel like I own my personal responsibilities, I feel like I don't have an expectation for someone else to be responsible for the way that I feel and the way that I experience now. And so I feel empowered. And so I hope that we continue to share our experience of individual empowerment, because I don't think that anybody really, I think that power comes from within. to some, to a great degree.
I completely agree. And I love that. Like this is about individual empowerment and individual with quotes, the experience of being separate, which is what everybody experiences. Like you can, as much as you want to say, no, there's no me. There's no me sense. Who's saying that? You know what I mean? Like we experience being separate and yeah, like recognizing that your experience just comes down to you and you are the only one that can have influence over your life and the way that you feel and the perspective that you take. That really is the goal. And it's not about doing that to become the best version of yourself. It's not doing that to succeed in the eyes of capitalism. It's not doing that to never feel sad again or, never feel lost because I know what's best for me and I'm always going to know what's best, right? Like that confusion is part of it. But just empowering yourself as the closest thing to a God you're going to get. So, like, building faith in yourself, understanding that no matter what situation you get into, you can handle it in the same way you always have, as long as you're not holding on to the expectation that you're going to behave the same way you did in the past, or that every new experience that is similar to a past experience is going to turn out in the same way, right? Like, if you recognize uncertainty and the inability to describe yourself or anything you're going through, um, there is a lot more possibility on the table. And also, you recognize how much you can take, like how powerful you actually are. Like I think of it as like my holding tank has gotten bigger, whereas certain experiences or emotions used to overwhelm me, or like I would push them down or avoid them or try and escape because I didn't think I could handle them. Like I've realized recently that I can hold them. I can just hold them. I can be angry and just sit there angry, right? And it's not going to kill me. It's not going to ruin my life. And, I could let those emotions or, a fleeting thought run my life. And I have before, but now I've recognized who's really in charge, you know, and it always is me. I'm my own God at the end of the day. Like, if I want my life to change, I can change it, but I have to change it. And that's where the personal empowerment comes in, giving yourself, the space to make a different decision, right? And knowing that it doesn't mean anything about the reality of you. It has nothing to do with your value. You can't know the outcome before you do something. So it empowers, at least for me, it's been like, okay, it's okay to act. You don't know, you can't know what the outcome is going to be, but you have never known. So, like, what do you want to do? Just sit back and watch your life pass you by? Or do you want to be an active participant? And being an active participant, I think, is, all we can really aim for. Like, and that deepens and becomes a bit of a self-refining process over time, right? Like you get better at coping with reality the longer you're here. But it's not about arriving anywhere. It's about, can you take responsibility for yourself, your emotions, and your experience literally right now? Like, can you just be okay with what you are?
And you can, even when you feel like you can't, even when you tell yourself that you can't, even when you tell yourself that other people do it better. Um, you always can. We can handle so much because we always have. Things have always worked out despite us never knowing how it would unfold, what exactly would happen next, how that would impact us. It's crazy because so many times I act as though each decision is a death sentence. So like that's it. This is it, guys. The next decision we make, we're either the next step is going to be off the cliff, or maybe we have one more step of land before we reach the cliff. It's almost like I feel like every step is like on the verge of walking off the cliff. And then you can walk off the cliff and just realize that the cliff was smaller, and it's not a cliff, it's a small ditch. And you're like, oh shit, I blew that way out of proportion. Like, oh, this reminds me of a Native American story or fable, like like lessons are in the stories, and it was about how within every person are two wolves. And we might expand it like there's a whole wolf pack, and one of the wolves is, the fearful wolf, and one is the anxious wolf, and one is the uncertain, like it's just but whichever one you feed. And in their story it was like you have a good wolf and a bad wolf, and whichever one you feed more gets bigger and bigger until it's so big that it eats the other wolf. And so they gave you just two wolves, like a good one and a bad one. And I do agree that in many ways, where your attention goes, it grows. So if you keep thinking about something, if something remains to be a focus, that fear, that anxiety tends to get larger. But in many ways, this conversation reminds me of Scooby-Doo and the Mystery Machine. And this conversation is the mystery machine giving us a ride to go catch the villain in the costume. And then you rip off the mask and it's like, shit, it's me. you know so
And I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids. Please.
like Scooby-Doo right now. I absolutely do. And there's so many wolves to catch. You're like, damn it, I thought I caught you last week. How did you get out again? And it's just us. It's always just us underneath the fears and the anxieties. And we're not a problem to solve. We are an experience to live. And it's a part of that experience is of unpleasantness and doubts and fears. And in sharing that, it feels more universal instead of making yourself feel dysfunctional. When we share how we all have those fears and doubts and how they impact the experience that we have, because you shoot down your dream before you even took one step to possibly live it. And what feels crazy is that when I'm in a quote unquote actual dream and I'm seeing other people in that dream, it never bothers me that I know that we're in my head. It never bothers me that those other people are me. In my quote unquote dream, when I'm asleep, if I see my mother in my head, it's like I am okay with the fact that I know that that is me. But when I wake up now, it doesn't seem so easy to see how much we are, or how much we are connected, and how it makes no difference if someone looks like they're in a different body, but we're all just a different expression within the same dream, within the same shared dream, and how we can influence it. That feels like that makes more sense than pretending that I'm just an individual on a singular rock floating through space and not connected to anything around me. That it makes more sense on some level that we're all in the shared dream as just expressions of dream-like experiences. But sometimes that feels easier to see than other times.
Yeah, that's a great point. It just depends on how real you think this physical experience really is. How real is this? And like we were saying, nothing is touching. We experience things as being solid, but they're constantly moving. Like we're only experiencing our sensation. We're only like me looking at this microphone right now. I'm only seeing the light that's reflecting off of this microphone, right? Like I'm not seeing the microphone. And so it really just depends on how seriously you're taking your sense perceptions. If that's the only difference between seeing somebody in a dream and because in my dream I still experience other people as being other people, but all of that is within the realm of my consciousness. But so is this me experiencing the outward external worlds, which I can't even say that's external.
Quick question, Jackie. Have you ever had a lucid dream? Because when it's lucid dreaming, you know that it's a dream, even though you're looking at quote unquote another person. I've only had one lucid dream, but have you had any experience like that in your dreams?
No, not that I remember. Like I have never I think I don't know, it's like every time I realize I'm dreaming, I wake up. So, um I have not successfully been able to lucid dream. That's something I would love to practice. I know like you can get into it by just starting to like dream journal and like there's a method you can like start, looking at your hand when you're awake. And so then you will habitually look at your hand in your dream too. And then when you look at your hand in your dream and it looks different than it does when you're quote unquote awake, that's what can cue you into figuring out that it's a dream. But for me personally, when I dream, it feels just as real as reality, even though none of it fucking makes sense in retrospect. Like when I think back in my dreams, I'm like, okay, yeah, so I felt like this was my apartment, but it's not my actual apartment, but it felt like I was in my apartment that I'm in right now. And like I had different people living with me, or like, I don't know. There's just always something that's a little bit off, but I feel like I can just not. Sometimes I just don't. Or actually, most of the time when I'm dreaming, I don't catch those things, and I only realize them after the fact. And we might have been talking about this in a call recently, but yeah, I wonder how much of that is going on when I'm awake too. That I just think that this reality is solid and it makes sense, and that when I'm not looking at something, it still continues to exist. But do I know that? No. Like there really there really isn't as solid of a line between what we experience in dreams and what we experience the rest of the time. And that is just something that's mind-boggling, but and it's uncomfortable from the perspective of somebody who wants to know that there's certainty, that there is a solid reality, and there is right and wrong, and there's good and bad, and I can be doing good, and I can be, I'm gonna be able to finally one day achieve this state of happiness. And like, just from the perspective of needing to have certainty, you can't recognize that the similarity. But it's very fucking dreamlike. And a lot of times in my day now, I'll have these moments where I look at somebody and I'm like, oh yeah, that's me. Like how you were saying earlier, like it's hard to see that sometimes. Like if you're in a situation where or the idea of yourself is very prominent, um, like it's harder to feel like the universe and to feel like the people that you're interacting with are you, or like the environment around you is you. But I do have those moments where I'm awake a lot of times where I'm relaxed and I'm like just tripping balls. I'm just, nothing has changed, but in an instant I'm like, this is all happening inside of my mind, and my mind is not in my skull. Like my mind is all of this. Like this is my mind. I'm in my mind, or is my mind in me? Or like what's happening? And that's exactly what I feel like in dreams sometimes. It's so mysterious.
Oh yeah, it does. Maybe we could do like an experiment where we like learn more about lucid dreaming and we just try our hand at it and be like, all right, Jackie, I'm gonna meet you by the Blue Mountain with 4 trees on it and 7 birds. I don't know how the birds are gonna be distributed amongst the trees, but we'll figure that out later, right? Like, or it doesn't have to be so specific. It could just be, if you see me in the dream world, look for a yellow shirt. I'm going to be wearing a yellow shirt. I think, I hope. Look for me. I'll see you around. Like, oh my goodness. But I think that'd be fun just to try our hand at it, because I only did it the one time because I knew it was super absurd. I was on some like country estate in like Virginia or Georgia, and then I look around, there's like zombies, and I was like, that's bullshit. This has got to be a dream. The zombies aren't real. And I was like, I'm gonna grow some fucking wings and fly out of here. Fuck you guys. And I did. I just, wings popped out and we just flew. I was like, I've had enough of this. I'm out of here, guys. So I think that's the only way that like I could. It's like I guess when you look at your hand and you see like 8 fingers and you're like, I know 5 is the number. I know it's or 4 fingers and 1 thumb for the people who care about that. It's like I know it's not more than 4 fingers. So if you saw like 8 fingers, you're like, okay, all right, there's a high chance that this is a dream. But then how do you know that the dream stops when you wake up? And then if it doesn't stop, where does it go? Or where is it? Am I teleporting somewhere mentally when I go to sleep? Like, well, we just don't know. We don't know when it starts, when it stops, where it's happening. So is this a dream within the dream, like a simulation within the simulation? You're like,
It's like Inception. And looking at your hand is like the totem that you can tell if you're in a dream or not, but like even then you can't know with certainty. And yeah, it could just be layered. What trips me out is that, yeah, where the fuck are dreams happening? Where the fuck? Like, where the hell is my consciousness happening? I don't know. Like around me, I guess. But then when I sleep, it's like I tap into almost a different dimension of this space, right? And I'm like tuning into a different radio frequency. And so I'm seeing something else or
right,
experiencing something else.
right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for turning to the Dream Station. Tonight we've got for you like,
Zombies. Yeah, I have lots of zombie dreams.
zombie apocalypse. But don't worry, for the low, low price of lucidness, you could have wings.
Yeah,
Oh my goodness, it trips me out. But it's a lot more. It feels a lot more fun and a lot lighter when sharing it or I let go of the process of like protecting it. Right. And so one of the things that I have noticed as a change in my direct experience is I feel more patient. But I was thinking about that and I was wondering, is it that we're more patient or that we're just controlling less? Is it that I have more patience or I just have less resistance and it feels like there's more space and in that space other people can fill that space and there's not such a combativeness to my responses or to the reactions that I used to just fly off the handle with. So I don't know if I'm actually more patient or if I just stopped or if I'm just taking things less seriously, or is it a combination of both? And it's just another layer of the uncertainty. But it feels like I don't know is an oasis in a desert of false certainty. And when I say I don't know and I genuinely feel like I don't know, um, a conversation with you feels like a glass of water and an invitation to the I don't know oasis. It's almost like I don't know is like the passcode. And the minute you genuinely say, I don't know, an oasis appears before you and a glass of water reaches down to you and you're like, I don't know. And, and another glass appears and you're like, is this I don't know a passcode? What is this? And it just feels like a break, like a weight is lifted, like you do get a refuge, like you do get to go to an oasis within. I don't know isn't a place to avoid or get to. It's just it feels like an old friend coming to visit when I genuinely welcome the uncertainty of each moment.
that's a great comparison of like an old friend coming to visit, like when you see one of your old buddies all the time and then all the, you know, all the things that you were caught up in just kind of melt away and everything gets put back into perspective. But that's absolutely how it is to recognize, I don't know, and genuinely mean it, right? Genuinely like be open to seeing, the nuance, looking into the uncertainty and not running away from it. And that glass of water, that oasis that opens up is potential. And that's where your life can actually change. Like in that spot of refuge that you always have access to with each new breath. with, it's also like you can be consistently refreshed in the present moment. It's the fountain of youth. Or, just it's a new opportunity literally every second, every millisecond. And you could start completely over. And yeah, it's just learning to return to that is all you really need to get through this life in a way that is as relaxed as possible, as peaceful as possible. Like, there's nothing wrong with running around the desert and being parched and tensed and stressed and living your life constantly trying to be something. There's nothing wrong with that, like in terms of like the universe and on a cosmic scale, like that's just an experience that could be had. And if you're having that, there's nothing wrong with it, but do you want to be having that experience?
It's hard to drink a cup of sand, man. It's hard to, drinking a cup of that false certainty is not easy. You could try
Yeah.
infinite cups of sand. They're never going to go that any easier. But
Mhm.
but uncertainty flows, and it feels like drinking a cup of water. Just it feels like such a natural thing to do. Is just to embrace the uncertainty that you are, because we're not separate again. So like feeling like existence is uncertain is also implying that it is separate from you. And it's like, if existence is uncertain and you're included in that existence, then you're also included in that uncertainty. You are the uncertainty that you know that is resisted. I am the uncertainty, but I doesn't I doesn't feel so small in this moment. I feels all inclusive.
And even the I is uncertain,
Oh yeah.
right? It's like you are the uncertainty, but it's not what you're thinking about in terms of uncertainty. And you're uncertain whether you're even thinking that. Like, it's all pervasive. And it's like, it's really, really fucking deep when you allow it to be, right? Like the extent of the uncertainty. And then with that, any sort of suffering, any sort of expectation or pressure or limiting belief just gets washed away. And I never thought I could exist in this space. Like, you're like, oh, I can just actually let go. Like, I can actually just be here now. I can let go. Like, yeah, slowly releasing your grip very cautiously. And yeah, you can. You can just fucking let go and you're still exactly where you've always been, right? You're still just right here. And this is something I've explored physically with my yoga practice too, of just practicing letting go of my entire body and all of my muscles and all my tendons and like not even try to hold myself together, right? Just like go full dead, like corpse mode and relax everything, relax my thoughts, stop trying to control my breath. And I just lie there and I feel myself being breathed and I feel myself being held together. I feel my heart continuing to beat. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm held. I'm held, right? Like, I don't have to try to continue to exist. It doesn't have to be so effortful. I can just continue to exist. And it's really here for my experience. Like, I'm not existing to do things, I'm not existing to become something. I'm existing to experience. And that happens right now. That can only happen right now. But up until recently, the future has been the priority. The future doesn't exist. And maybe it does, like maybe it's already happened, but it's not my concern, right? The future is not my concern because it would be a waste of my time and energy right now trying to come up with an idea of something that, from my experience, has never been what I expected it to be. So it's like you can let go of the past, you can let go of the future, and you're still going to be just fine. And you can still have a job. and you can still participate in society and you can still fucking pay your bills, but you don't have to take it so seriously. You can see it as the dance, the play, the production that it is. It's just God playing pretend with itself, right? Like this is God playing house on like the grandest, it's the most fucked up game of house you would ever you could ever think of. Like every aspect and variation of experience is included. And that isn't always pretty, but goddamn, is it beautiful.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It is a game, and it's a game that we take very seriously sometimes, just like we did when we were kids, when we were enjoying or just being the experience of being a child. We absolutely took our games very seriously sometimes, and sometimes it was serious and we were upset, and sometimes it was serious because we were so engulfed by our imagination. Like the couch was the ship, I was a pirate, I no one could tell me anything differently because I took like imagining being that pirate or that astronaut that seriously. And sometimes we're the astronauts, so we're like walking slow motion in the house, like we're actually on the moon, like, and four, we're going, like, just, just whatever, which I know that's like probably like trucking lingo. We're just, but you know what, astronauts, who says that I wasn't an astronaut who drew a space truck to the moon? I could be making a delivery, delivery, open up the hatch, delivery is here, just, but we took it so seriously.
It's like it's your Amazon driver on the
Oh
moon.
my goodness. It is. It is. Your driver is here. Please open the landing door, just, oh my God. We're at the docking gate. But we took it so seriously, because we were so involved with imagining being whatever it was. And we do that as we experience being adults. People take being a CEO, or being a person who rises through the corporate ladder, or being someone with power and respect in the community, and they take that role very seriously. How they imagine themselves in a social environment, they take super seriously, and then they judge people who don't take it seriously. The type B personalities, the hippies, and the surfers. Hey man, it's like they judge the people who don't take their game very seriously, and neither person is playing incorrectly, because we're all just playing, we're all just here, and we're all just exploring options until we want to look for a new one. And that's all it feels like we're ever doing, is just moving our attention, moving our priorities, moving our focus to different places on a scale of perception. And it feels like I'm moving different scales at the same time: scales for my work, scales for DU, scales for me, scales for dealing with family. Like it just feels like I'm moving so many pieces on this infinite board game. And sometimes I judge certain moves, but that's a part of that. I guess that's a part of the game, is the fact that you forget that you're playing a game, and that you're not the character that you're moving.
Exactly. Like if it wasn't so persuasive, we wouldn't be able to learn as much from it. Like we wouldn't be able to experience the depths of pain and heartbreak and joy if we couldn't experience being separate. So it really is a a critically important part of like this experience as a whole. And like I maybe we can write off our separation because it is the source of a lot of our pain. Like, yeah, without the experience of separation, we wouldn't experience pain in the same way, if at all. So, like, it's understandable why our human mind would like sometimes resist that. And I think that's why there are people who, in the radical non-dual philosophy, right? They deny the experience of being an individual, of being a self. And they're like, no, that doesn't actually exist, which it does exist as an illusion. So I think it can be both at the same time. Like it is you, but it's not. Like the character is you, but it's not all that you are. It is just sort of like the fountain of potential that you are closest to, like your consciousness is aware of. And yeah, it's never what you think ever.
Oh, I love that. The imagery that came to mind was like, I'm born, and Amanda, the idea of Amanda is a lump of clay, and it just gets thrown right onto the slab in front of me, and I am the sculptor, and I get to change that mound of clay into any shape that I want, and I could always melt it down and recreate it, melt it down and recreate something else, and in every moment I am melting it down and recreating it. It's just sometimes I think that I am the creation, and in many ways you are, because the creation comes from your awareness and your experience or your attention. But it's not just that. It's that you are, your creations are a reflection of you, are a piece of you, but you're so much more than that. We're so much more than that. It's the observer and the observed are the same. And so to some degree, the two don't exist, because if they're the same thing, then to call them two separate things doesn't make sense from one perspective. And from another perspective, it makes total sense that you would call one thing that appears to be separate two things. So I think I really love what you said, Jackie. I think that we are that idea, that character, and we are so much more than just that character.
Yeah, like we embody certain points on an infinite number of spectrums of duality, right? And like we might feel that we're separate and different from somebody that's like completely opposite of us, at least they seem that way, right? Based on the experiences that they've had. Maybe they grew up on the other side of the world, right? And we see that as being different, but it's like you aren't one, like one end of the spectrum does not exist without the other side because they need each other. Like light needs dark, happy needs sad. They're necessary for each other to continue to exist. And so inherently they look like two different things, but they're one thing. Like they're inseparable. And that's how all ends of duality are, right? Like it's all this one thing, but it has both two ends of the spectrum, but they're necessary opposites. And we can see that in everything in our lives, right? And so like we only create conflict and burden and take it seriously when we're like seeing those things as two separate forces that are fighting against each other rather than these two forces that are in constant flux but are both part of the same flow, right? Like it's not two different things and nothing is separate. It's all beautifully interconnected.
Right? It's not like darkness was there and then all of a sudden light shows up. Just what's going on here? What's going on here? Looks a little shadowy over there, guys. Just inviting myself to the party. It's like they exist with each other on that scale, because you only have something that's dark because it's contradictory to something that's light. You only have something that's hot in contradiction to something that is also cold. You couldn't have, like you said, you couldn't have one without the other. So they exist. They arrive in existence at the same time. Like one isn't separate. But it certainly makes me feel, or I think I tell myself that I feel better when I can say that something is hot versus cold. Um, or when I can say that something is fair versus unfair, right? Something that feels a little more mental and physical, personal. That life is unfair, and it's like usually I find myself thinking that or saying that kind of sentiment because I have a judgment about how things have gone, how things are going, and I assume I know what's best for myself and everyone going forward of how things should go forward. But you know, I miss the bus at a bus stop, for an example. And as I'm waiting for the next bus, I happen to have the most amazing conversation with somebody that takes the next bus at that regular time. So let's say I miss the 10 o'clock bus, I have to wait an hour for the 11 o'clock. And I happen to have a conversation with somebody that normally gets on the 11 o'clock. But I normally don't see that person because I normally would have taken the 10 o'clock in this example. But when I miss the bus, that feels like, oh no, I'm so like that shouldn't have happened. I end up having the most amazing conversation with somebody on their quote unquote schedule. And that influences the rest of my day and sometimes the rest of my life. We never know how impactful a single conversation can be or a single moment where, we're on the bus still in my imagination and I'm getting off the bus, somebody's getting on the bus and they're short 25 cents and I just happen to pull 25 cents, hand it to them, and walk off the bus, not waiting for a thank you. I've got things to do. And just possibly giving someone that 25 cents could have changed their whole life, where they thought that, there aren't any good people out there. But that 2-second interaction influenced their perception on the sum of humanity. Right. And things are not always that grandiose, right? Things are not always that big of an impact, but you just never know how one seemingly small moment, how it can ripple. And it doesn't always ripple immediately. Sometimes you think of a conversation you had with a stranger because of a book you're reading, and the book that you're reading reminds you of a conversation that you forgot about years ago. And that conversation that you had that didn't mean anything to you for years after you have had it, all of a sudden becomes pivotal in your experience of self-knowledge and self-faith. And then you're like, oh man, I haven't thought about, man, I wonder how they're doing. Like you just don't know how things will ripple for yourself as in your individual experience, or for us in what feels like a collective experience. But we always have the opportunity to shift our focus, right? It's never about being in any one place or having a tendency to not go into the pit or to not feel down on yourself. It's just remembering that in every single moment, there is a new opportunity for you to shift your focus or to maintain.
And that's all the difference it takes. And your entire experience of reality can dramatically change. Your whole life can dramatically change just by giving yourself a little bit of space for questioning, for possibility, for uncertainty. But yeah, I think that's a great place to wrap up this episode, which would not have happened had our previous version of season 6, episode 10 have been recorded properly and the video have, come out. So this just goes to show that, just as you said earlier, Amanda, there are no mistakes, just, happy accidents. As long as you choose to view them with a attitude of openness and not positivity necessarily, but just openness and possibility rather than frustration. And that's where change can happen. That's where miraculous things can happen, right? In that little gap between reality and what we think we know.
Absolutely. I love that. With openness and potential, instead of with frustration and opinions and the judgments that usually tag along. But thank you so much, everybody, for joining us on take 2 of episode 10. Yeah. And we might release the other episodes at some later date with just as audio only episodes, but we'll figure that out later. But thank you so much, everybody. And we look forward to continuing this ongoing conversation and to hearing what you guys also think.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Bye.